Walt had announced that Snow White would release in December of 1937, but by the summer of that year, the studio was majorly behind schedule and massively over budget. Roy had taken out several loans at this point, and when he went to the bank asking for another, he was told that someone from the bank would need to see their progress on Snow White. They needed reassurance that their money was being well spent. Early in September, the banker in charge of Disney's account, Joe Rosenberg, visited the Disney studio to watch a rough cut of the film. If he was pleased with what he saw, he would go back to the bank and tell them to approve the loan, and production of Snow White could be completed. If not, then the loan would be declined, and the Disney studio would not be able to complete Snow White and would have to declare bankruptcy. Walt Disney was the only one in the room with Rosenberg to watch the rough cut of Snow White, and as much of the film hadn't been animated or colored in yet, Walt had to explain what would go in the unfinished parts, or act out the parts that were still just storyboards. As Walt fought to hide his anxiety and sell the film as much as he could, Rosenberg barely reacted, only briefly nodding or verbally acknowledging Walt's explanations. As the screening ended and the lights came back on, Walt couldn't tell what Rosenberg had thought of Snow White. Walt walked Rosenberg out to his car to leave, and Rosenberg talked about Roy, the weather, and seemingly anything but the film he had just watched. Rosenberg got into his car and said goodbye, and then just before driving off he added,
"That thing is going to make you a hat full of money."
At least, that's how Walt remembered it. It's likely that this story, as many of Walt's stories were, was embellished. Walt and Rosenberg were likely not the only two in the room, as Disney had recently ended their partnership with their last distributor, United Artists, and made a deal with RKO Radio Pictures to distribute not only Disney's cartoon shorts, but also Snow White. The RKO executives, including studio head Ned Depenit, were also shown the rough cut of Snow White, almost certainly at the same time as Rosenberg. At any rate, the RKO executives loved the film and made a distribution deal with Disney, and the bank approved the loan. With funding and distribution now secured, the Disney studio could finally complete Snow White.